every time I hear you guys say co-pilot for docs, I hear dogs. I get very excited that somebody would have made that and then realize it is not for dogs.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 426 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam and I do art, I guess.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's July 28th, 20 Jubilee. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net, whose money we have grabbed.
So good.
You may have noticed also that when Seth said 8th, he also actually pronounced the silent P that's in there. There's a because 8, you know, 8 has a lot of silent letters in it, and a lot of people forget actually that there's a P in there too. It's so silent.
E-I-G-P-T-H.
Yeah,
It's so silent you often don't even write it, you know. But it is technically there.
Now, what you may not have noticed is that also when I said it, I actively farted, you know, in the background.
Yeah.
Which is different from passive farting, which it's kind of like a sonar radar kind of a thing, you know.
Is farting? Wait, hold on.
I have many questions.
Now I do too. So one of them which I just want to get out, which is the idea that farting could be a part of language is just hilarious. But I want to knock that one aside real quick to get to the question of passive versus active farting. To ask the question: is farting ever passive?
Yeah, I think if you cough and accidentally fart at the same time, that's probably passive.
So
or maybe while you're sleeping.
Accidental is sort of what you're talking about.
I'm talking about active, meaning like you've chosen a strategic time to deploy it to emphasize a point that you're making in speech.
Like the word. Yeah, I got you. I'm here for that.
I thought you meant just like conscious versus unconscious. Like, because you know how you can like actively choose to breathe and like, but if you don't pay attention, now you're just breathing and it's fine, you know?
Yeah, it's a difference between doing something strategically versus sort of thoughtlessly, you know? Yeah.
I don't think farts just happen like breathing does, you know? Like,
I think they do. Because you got peristalsis just happening constantly.
They're trying to happen, but I feel like or is it because farts are so taboo that we've all, over our lifetimes, developed the ability to
It was just clenched, man.
always trap it until we consciously decide to release it.
Yeah, I think much like aliens, we've all decided, let's not talk about farts and pretend like it's not happening.
That's a good pivot, Seth, because the alien hearings were this week, and
it was
pretty cool.
It was great.
Did we learn anything?
So it was. I'll talk about this a little bit. I've been following this UFO news ever since David Grush spoke a couple of months ago, and I've read everything I could. I read this great book by Leslie Kean called like UFOs, something like pilots, generals, and military something. It's just like all military people talking about stuff that they've encountered and corroborated with like radar data and stuff. But the long and short of it is, there's all kinds of wild shit flying around in the sky, just flying circles, or in some cases squares around our like fighter jets and stuff, zipping up into space.
Now it's on a congressional record. That's the thing that's different. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not just a bunch of randos on the History Channel being like,
it's these two respected veteran pilots and a high-ranking military intelligence official. And they went under oath and they basically like laid out the case and they're like, this is real. This is happening. It's been happening for a long time. There's still a ton of like classified stuff that they cannot talk about. So there's like more stuff coming down the pipe where they're going to be like meeting with members of Congress behind closed doors and stuff. But it's really interesting to kind of see like the media response or lack of response to this in some cases. Like it was fascinating to me how like you've got high-ranking military people going in front of a congressional hearing under oath and literally saying like, yeah, we've not only are aliens
there's wild
real,
shit going on.
They're here and they've been here for a long time, and the U.S. government has like retrieved fully intact alien ships, et cetera, and I can't just and the dude literally, David Grush literally said like, I have names, I have exact locations, I have all the information, and I can give that to you in a secure compartmentalized information facility. And I'm happy to do that, right? He's like, I can't state that publicly on the record because
also called a skiff if you're
a skiff.
Really cool.
Yeah. And so, he's like, I've got the receipts and I'll deliver them to you. I can't, he can't just announce all this shit to the world or he'll go to prison for the rest of his life for espionage, for revealing state secrets. Right. But, it's been pretty interesting, and it's kind of like cracked open the door to all this stuff. But the fact that this happened, which in my mind is like one of the wildest things to happen in Congress that I could ever think of. And then on the front page of the New York Times, it was like, some Japanese pop star comes out as gay. I'm like, I feel like there's more important news closer to home.
It's crazy to me is that within what is it now, basically a 3-month window or 6-month window, you have congressional hearings on basically general artificial intelligence and aliens happening. I'm like,
the 2020s are turning out to be quite a ride.
A journey we are on.
Yeah, and also importantly, the Defense Authorization Act just passed, which has a 63 or 64 page amendment in it from Chuck Schumer, and that amendment gives a 300-day deadline for government organizations and private organizations to turn over all materials and information about non-human technology to the federal government. So there's kind of basically what this kind of the angle that they're taking on all this is this is not about aliens. It's about government transparency. Because they're basically coming at it from the angle of the Defense Department is blocking Congress from even asking questions about this stuff or interviewing people or whatever. And they're coming up with all kinds of ways to stonewall and prevent investigations. And they also have all kinds of just missing money. They can't pass an audit. Congress will give them a bunch of money. And then they're just like, oh, I don't know where that went. Sorry. Anyway, money, please. Right. And so by framing this thing as a oversight and transparency issue,
it's a budgeting issue, really.
It's a budgeting issue. And it just happens to be about aliens, but it could have been about anything. So that's going to be kind of ongoing, but they're kind of this new bill gives a grace period where if people turn over the stuff they have, then they're in the clear within this window. But if they don't turn their stuff in beyond that point, or within that window, then they'll be prosecuted. Right. So it's pretty legit. It's very interesting looking at an actual law passed by Congress that throughout the entire thing just continuously mentions technology created by non-human entities. That's pretty wild.
Weird times.
Yeah. So anyway, keep your eye on that,
Yeah. We'll definitely be circling back on that with any additional news as it comes up.
Yeah. And otherwise, studio news, we've just been working on Crashlands 2 stuff. We just got boss fights wrapped up, which is we just wanted to kind of put a pin in that as a milestone, because a boss fight in a game is kind of the culmination of every other thing that you've got going on, right? You can't have a boss fight if you don't have combat figured out, if you don't have, a means of getting the player to the boss in a way that's makes sense, compelling. And also just the way that boss fights tend to work in games is really to think of it as a dance or an orchestra, which is normally if you're fighting regular enemies in the game, they're just kind of around, right? They don't. You can just put them places.
Yeah, they're in various locations and various combinations, and so there's not a concert feel to it. But a boss is more than just the entity that is being placed down. The actual boss, it's actually the arena that the boss is in. Also, right? Any really good boss fight typically makes extremely heavy use of the ground that it's on for purposes of either frustrating the player or even modifying it, as the boss kind of does their thing.
Yeah, and even when you think of Terraria and stuff, right, where you kind of govern what the arena is, so much of Terraria players' efforts go into building the boss fight,
the arena.
Yeah, building an arena for yourself that allows you to get in it, basically turn yourself into the boss of the arena, as opposed to the boss having, right? Or getting them out of position, typically is also a big thing.
Yeah. Which is that just means that, it's having the sort of environment be part of the experience means you can create much more interesting and nuanced interactions that only will really work in that context. But then you can have a 2 or 3 minute fight with story beats or dialogue moments happening throughout it, and like the boss will change phases and go and start doing something new partway through the fight, you know, and like all this cool stuff that would be just honestly, if regular enemies had that level of complexity, it would just suck. Like it would be so annoying to fight them.
I think you're describing Cuphead, you know, which is every fight is, which was true. Like it was super fun, but after maybe like half an hour, I was like, "This is too boss fights. It's too hard."
And so we're really pumped about that. Because that's kind of like it marks an important moment in development where all of the core big systems are in and they're functioning. And then going forward, it's just going to be like, oh, we want to do this one new thing. All right, that'll be like 2 hours of dev time to get that hooked up, and that's good to go. So all the things going forward are going to be like a lot of these little features, little improvements and polish points. And now we're getting into what we call our content push phase, which is blocking out all of the things that we want to have in the game now going forward and sort of gray boxing them, meaning like putting in versions of those things that mechanically work but don't have all the visuals and sounds and everything else. And then we kind of slot those in. And then it turns into this last bit of development turns into what we call almost like a paint by numbers kind of thing. Like once we've blocked it all out,
start at the beginning and just go.
Yeah, we know where everything is. We know how everything's going to work. And then we just need refinement, art, sound, implementation, iterations, you know. And not too long, suddenly we'll just stand up and look around bleary-eyed and be like, we're done. We did it. So very exciting. Very exciting. All right. So anyways, that's kind of like the couple big news beats, just aliens and boss fights. Yeah. So we thought we'd mostly tackle questions on today's episode. You guys ready?
So ready. Yeah.
All right. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. The highest upvoted question comes from Glorious Cashew, who says, is official mod support something you're considering for Crashlands 2? If not, do you think everything you've done with the game changer will make it more moddable? Also, hi, I've been listening for a bit, but I've never asked a question.
Hello.
I recognize the name, so it must be from Discord then.
Discord, yeah.
I think the official stance is that there isn't an official stance yet on modding. However, you are 100% correct that a lot of our efforts in developing the game changer were also to make it possible for, if we wish to do modding, to be able to do so without dying, which is good. And then even if we don't do modding support in an official way, like through Steam Workshop, it would be immensely easier for anybody else to do some kind of extension stuff to the game.
There was basically modifying like the existing game in terms of like what the numbers are, what things are called, what the dialogue was, all that kind of stuff, right? Would be pretty straightforward just with the game contents because of how the game changer works and the content that it generates. Because it's basically just a big, really well-structured data file, right?
Straightforward, but a lot.
It would be a lot. Without tooling to support it, it would be a lot of effort.
If you're trying to walk through that JSON file,
yeah, but you don't have to also reverse engineer like how all the data goes in, right? But for things like the actual like visuals and then even the world map, because the world map is like saved to this, custom binary format to make it as concise as possible and stuff, right? But our Levelhead community reverse engineered how levels are encoded. And that's also a wonky, complex binary format that has no documentation whatsoever. Right?
That impressed me because the mechanism we used to compress the levels down and stuff, we didn't like get that from somewhere. Like we made it up.
Yep.
Like
it's just raw. It's just raw binary, right?
It's just raw binary. So it's just ones and zeros. And for them to, there's a process that they'll go through, where they like get a level and then they'll like make some assumptions about what it is. And then they'll make one change and then save it and then see what changes in the binary and start to identify location, like memory locations in there and like how it works, which is pretty wild.
Yeah,
that's a thing.
Yeah, so collectively, which is all to say that because the files that make up, because I think you can kind of think of like what we're delivering with Crashlands 2, we're basically delivering a game engine that like runs Crashlands 2 content, right? And then content, which for the map, for the rules, for all the for everything about like what's actually in the game, except for the raw visuals. But everything else actually has a file that lives outside of the engine, right? That like describes that thing in some format. So it's like easy. It's not necessarily going to be easy to do, but it's easy to get to, right? Yeah. And to work on. And then the one thing that people won't have just easy access, with the idea being that you could just change that stuff. You could just like edit it and then reboot the game basically, right? The thing where that's not true is the images, because those are actually baked into the game engine, basically. Right. So to replace those requires more effort, because you can't just modify a file and be done. You'd have to do some very wonky stuff to try to change the file itself, and try to do that without triggering Steam or an antivirus to be like, hey, this executable file has changed. This is probably bad, So that stuff gets a lot trickier. And so I think, which means that the short answer is basically that given that we have no specific plan to intentionally enable mods, then what that would look like at launch is that a huge swath of stuff would be accessible to people who are really into modding, who like nerd out about this shit, right? And then some of it, which is again just the images basically, is not. And if we wanted to actually make it so people could do mods, then one of the, like intentionally, the question that always goes there is to what extent, right? When a game company actually endorses and supports mods, because what they'll usually do is they'll add some layer to the game as an engine for how it basically interprets files. They might add some tooling. They might take more of the content and break it out of the main game sort of file, right? So that's in separate stuff that gets slurped up by the game when it boots, so that they can all be just replaced with stuff, right? Because of how GameMaker works, there's a lot of limitations for image assets, because if we just let you slurp them up automatically, like out of a folder or something, then GameMaker does a really bad job of doing that in a hardware economical way. So that the long and short of why that's a problem is that typically when we have a 2D game, we've got thousands and thousands of images, right? And if each of those images was its own individual file, then your graphics card would just burst into flames, because like, let's say you're looking at a scene in the game where there's like terrain on the ground, there's characters walking around, there's
a couple hundred images usually displayed actually at once, right?
Yeah, there'd be a few hundred like different images simultaneously on the screen, and if every time your graphics card wanted to render one of those, each frame it would need to load the image from disk, which is slow, display it, and then unload it, and then load the next one, right? And so these are called texture page swaps, where it has to like load stuff from disk and whatever. So or just from memory into the because you got your computer memory where things are stored from the game, right? And then there's you got your video
graphics memory, so
VRAM,
because most of it is swapping between the two, and so that's the idea of what a texture page is, which is having a whole bunch of images on one. It's basically just one big PNG, right? Yeah. Where all of your images have been slapped onto it, so that you only have to
swap so much.
Yeah, you only do one swap of that whole thing, and then the video card knows where all the stuff is inside of there, right? And then it just draws like the one out of it.
Yeah, but when if you load images sort of at runtime, then they're not being packed together into one texture page. They're just standalone sprites. And so if you did that, then it's totally possible to do it, but the game would just slow to a crawl because of the texture page swap burden. So that's kind of the big challenge
to make that.
That's the main one. Yeah, that's the main sort of technical feasibility thing. But I think even with that consideration in there, the reality is that it's also a timing question. So some games, they do launch with workshop support, right? But kind of, if you haven't picked up from what we're describing, really being able to fully support mods.
Intentional design support.
Yeah, intentional design support isn't it's not a checkbox. It's basically it's fully a data architecture and also a bunch of other problem solving stuff depending on your engine. And
some of it does make, like, if you do support some of those things, some of it does make development easier. Like that's definitely true. And that's actually why things like, because we could just like give access to the game changer and like give access to the map editor, because those are actually in game, right? And we built those to make development easier, and that also means they would make modding easier, right? It's these other things though, like that don't really make sense as much for modding, like dealing with the raw images that are baked into the game and stuff, right? That we also have external tooling to support, and it's pretty complicated and and wonky, right? And we have a whole system to manage that is like it's a good development system, but it's not a user friendly, end user system.
Yeah. So
but also, we don't necessarily want to make it so that you can just literally use the Game Maker engine as an engine and now just make a completely new thing.
Yeah,
right.
No, that's not the intent, right? So I think it's where it comes down. Where it's like, I think to me, mod support in many ways is a follow from a good launch, which is to say that if you have a game that the community is very very into it, because you have to have the community who is just fired up about the game in order for modding to be a worthwhile activity, then it can be to me, it's a follow on from initial launch, not a thing that you necessarily want to prioritize with the launch, because it requires work, and it's the kind of work that will only make a difference in the long run for the game if the game is already successful.
Okay, let me ask you this. There's something I've been thinking about with mods after watching Kerbal Space Program 2 and its turbulent launch, as well as just like thinking about Skyrim, right, which has been around now since 2000.
8 or 9 or
9?
10. It's old as the hills.
So something kind of weird about modding is that it seems like once you have a popular game with mods, it is nearly impossible for the developer to release sequels in that franchise.
I don't think that would be true for Skyrim. As in, like, I don't think the mods. I think it depends on what the mods are doing. When the mods are extending the game to make it better by adding stuff to it, right? Like in the case of Kerbal Space Program, then now the future game is, and basically if the content that's coming out is like all works together basically, right? And it basically allows the community to now, with thousands of people basically, right, keep on adding stuff to the game post-launch. And if the modding system and the type of game supports doing that in a way that just makes the game grow, then I agree, because now you're competing not just with that, but also with the mod ecosystem, right?
Yeah, you got tens of thousands of people adding content to your old version of your game for free, and like you can't keep up with it. There's no way.
But I think it's the question of what a sequel is, which is that in the case of Crashlands, like say we had modding support for the original Crashlands for the last fucking 7 years, right? It wouldn't matter because the changes that we're making are so enormous and fundamental on the design level, right? I think the difference with Kerbal Space Program is that they were just like, it's also putting rockets together.
Yeah, it's more one sandbox moving to another one where the improvements are basically like the graphics are better, right?
Their intent was like better graphics and better performance. They totally failed on the performance side of things. And it still doesn't look as good as modded KSP1. Yeah,
exactly.
There are the graphics mods that people have made that look better than Kerbal Space Program.
So I think it's just a different category of.
If it's a pure sandbox game, I do think. I mean, we saw this with Terraria. Terraria tried to make a sequel a while ago.
Yeah, but think about like games that have huge modding communities, right? If it's like, all right, Grand Theft Auto, where's the sequel? That's been out for like 10 years. Skyrim, there were a bunch of Elder Scrolls games, and then Skyrim, and then there hasn't been one in like 12 years.
Oh yeah,
and like RimWorld, Minecraft, like there's all these games like they do incredibly well, and a big part of their success is like the community aspect of modding, like making evergreen content, but also it becomes, I think, incredibly difficult for the developers to figure out what's the next move in this. Like you're saying, Sam, you gotta release something that's very different.
Yeah, I think it has to do with differentiation in a sequel, which I think is one of those things that is hard to. It's harder to design. I think it's just a short version of it. It's like you're not just taking the same thing you did before, and then the whole, like some of the gist of the recipe people talk about is like you keep 70% of it the same, and then you change like 20%, and then you like add 10%. It's like some kind of rough thing, which is not at all what we did.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what the fuck it means. I think for us it was just like, okay, let's just take the spirit of the thing and reinterpret it given our new skill set, right? That was kind of the gist of the.
Well, something that's been kind of interesting about working on Crashlands 2 is that I think we did have way more things changed at the beginning. And over time, there's a lot of aspects of Crashlands 2 that have actually drifted back toward the design of Crashlands 1.
Yes.
in ways that we like. It's kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we weren't that dumb back then. Like we did figure out some things that were actually kind of good ideas that still persist even in this environment. And, we wanted to try some different things to see if we could do it better or find new avenues of thinking about those game systems. And then ultimately it kind of loops back around. Like it ends up looking similar to what we had. It's not the same, but it's going to be similar, right?
Yeah, but it just feels completely different. But I would actually take it different because you're kind of describing like there are these big games that have these huge modded communities, and now they can't like make a sequel, right? I don't think that's what's happening though. Actually, I think that's true for a very tiny subset of games. I think Kerbal Space Program is probably like, I don't even think it's the example of that. I think the reason they can't make a sequel is because they're doing a really bad job of running their business. So
production
like
that appears to be the case.
And everything I've heard about how they've done their stuff, like I think that's been historically true, right? But
I think their initial,
if you look at like Skyrim and these other things, right? Like and Minecraft and all these, right? They don't need to make a sequel. Grand Theft Auto 5, there's a 6 now, right? I don't know what we're on, but the Grand Theft Auto franchise makes like $1 billion a year, right? Yeah, Minecraft probably still makes like $1 billion a year, right? And they are treated as evergreen products. These things are still updated. They get live ops support, all this kind of stuff. They tend to be online games. Skyrim is an exception, but Skyrim is like Doom, right? It's on every fucking thing in the universe, right? And I don't think it's because like the modding community is a big part of why that thing just keeps thriving everywhere. I think that's definitely true, but I don't think that holds it back at all from a sequel, because I think the modding community would be so jazzed for the sequel because if they can mod it still, right? Because then they get to go, because like every time a new thing comes out, it becomes the blue sky. Everybody's trying to now have the top. It's a new opportunity for you to take the stuff that, and basically, honestly, just steal everybody else's ideas, right? And be like, that mod that everybody loved in old Skyrim, like I made it for new Skyrim, right? And like
that design that's in Breath of the Wild, where everybody climbs everything and has a glider. Now it's in Skyrim.
Exactly.
Like,
So,
would be dope, actually.
And if it's easier to do modding in the new stuff, and the outcomes are cooler and more interesting or whatever, because the underlying game is better, right? Then I think the modding community loves that enough that I think it's really easy to get the modding community to mod, because they're basically early adopters. That's like their whole thing, right? And they thrive on jank, So I would say it's probably really easy to get a modding community on board to something that makes modding possible for a franchise they already love. But if the base game doesn't differentiate itself enough
then
from the original one, then what's the point? Because then you might as well just go back to the original.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the base game needs, and this is where Kerbal Space Program 2 fell flat, because they actually had their original announced launch date was, I think, 2020.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
It was like summer 2020, and then they launched into early access in 2023 with like 10% of the features of Kerbal Space Program 1, and the stuff that they did launch was just totally broken.
Yeah.
Like your rocket would just wobble around like a wet spaghetti noodle and just explode for no reason.
And the hardware requirements were just off the fucking charts.
Yeah, it was running at like 6 frames per second with like a rocket with 20 parts. I mean, just the whole thing totally.
I looked back into it a few weeks ago because I was like, I wonder if they've actually hit into their, because they'd published their roadmap, right? Which is, I mean, a very vague, flashy roadmap of like the major features, right?
Yeah.
But it was like, I think it's like there's like 5 or 6 items on that roadmap, and it wasn't until the third one, I think, where it's now a different game actually. And so a few weeks ago, I was like, "Oh, I wonder if they've made any progress." And there was literally no update information at all. And it was like 6 months post launch or something like that,
Yeah, they had released some big bug fix patches, where like the whole patch is just like, hey, here's 600 bug fixes. It's just pages and pages of bug fixes. But the concern I had, and like you're saying, I haven't seen a lot of progress toward getting it up to feature parity with Kerbal Space Program 1.
I think we've taken it out for a long time.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if after this many years of development, if they're launching it riddled with bugs like that, and then like that implies that, and like we learned this lesson a long time ago, and like we did the DevOps video and all that stuff, but like you cannot cut corners because it'll come back and bite you later. Like the bugs are still in there, and as they build and build and build, you end up with an unmaintainable product.
It just becomes more and more costly to fix. And also, if you're trying to do it now while you already have a very mad audience, you know?
Yeah, because you're trying to get features out. And now you've got like the players are upset and like there's bugs that they're getting hit by that you, for example, like one of the worst things as a developer is if you've got players being hit by some bugs and you know that like, okay, I could add a workaround for this bug, but actually there's a big systems level problem that will require weeks to fix and untangle to prevent like this whole suite of bugs wholesale. But also you've got a demand for like, okay, we need to get more features out or whatever. Like we got a big patch coming up or that kind of a thing. And so you have to just, in some cases, because of management pressure or whatever, you would have to just cut corners, do the Band-Aid fix, implement the new feature, and I've implemented that feature on top of this wobbly, shitty foundation. And it just keeps becoming a Jenga tower. And my assumption is that that's kind of what happened before they even launched Kerbal Space Program 2, is that like they built it on a shaky foundation. They launched it. It's full of bugs. And now they can't add features, but also there's so many bugs that they can't fix them. You know, the whole thing is just a mess.
Well, I think it's also anytime you see that kind of a thing, it gives you an insight into the internal dynamics of the company, the people who are building it, right? Because left to their own devices, programmers will gladly spend all of their time fixing bugs and like
or just refactoring
stuff, making things clean and easy to maintain, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so it is the case that you don't want the balance of power to go all the way on the developer side because they're going to make a fucking bulletproof product in the end, but it's barely going to
do anything. Because the best bug fix is just deleting everything.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other side, you're going to have your sort of management and design kind of push, which depending on the company structure, that can occupy a lot of different roles and spaces, right? But that's the one concerned, or product management, or that's the part concerned with the actual feature set and what's being delivered to the downstream user in the end, right? And if the balance of power goes all the way on that side, you have a bug-riddled mess of because for them it's just feature. Yeah, exactly. And so a sign of a well-managed project with a good balance of power between these sort of competing interests of where the time is going to go is that you have basically, because they'll never get rid of the bugs if you're going to ship something, but they're going to be innocuous, right? They're just no big fucking deal when you run into them. You're like, oh, that was a little weird, right? And that's the entirety of the response that you get from those bugs. And there's a lot of features, but they all work together, right? And it's not excessive. There weren't big promises that then failed to deliver, all that kind of stuff. Because everybody's actually working together and trying to find a way to pull each other towards a middle that actually allows you to deliver something relatively low bug, relatively bug free with
you deliver something people want that doesn't have too many bugs. That's it. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, it's fine if there's some.
There's going to be some.
There's going to be bugs. Yeah, there will be bugs. That was that one movie. All right. Next question comes from TimConceivable, who says, "What are the chances that you all will update Levelhead with new content or finish cut features once Crashlands 2 is released?" Sorry if this is something you don't want to answer, but I know a lot of us Levelhead fans are dying to know. Well, I'm sorry to say, very, very low.
Yeah. Yep.
For a couple of reasons. One is once Crashlands 2 is released, there's going to be a lot of Crashlands 2 stuff
work to do.
Well,
probably
another year
for like probably for like a year afterwards, unless it goes absolutely horribly, in which case we have a new problem and we've got to start working on the next game.
Or if it goes absolutely spectacularly, in which case then we're working on that for a good while.
Or we'll just do whatever we want, which in that case could include a Levelhead update if we just want to.
Well, and that's the scenario where like, because here I think we all are in agreement that like we all fucking love Levelhead.
Absolutely. And
I'm so proud of it.
So fucking fun because
Levelhead community is amazing. Yeah. And it's I still like I feel like as a game developer, I can die happy knowing that I made Levelhead.
Yeah.
Like I'm so proud of it. It's an amazing game. It's just great. The sales numbers did not materialize in a way that we had hoped.
It would make no sense from a business perspective for us to spend any energy on Levelhead, just sort of to make it very clear. It would not be a thing that we'd be doing. It would be to our detriment. It's the short
again, unless things go so well with Crashlands 2 that we can treat ourselves to a little Levelhead update, which isn't. I'd say is it's unlikely, but it's not out of the question because it's a fucking great game and it's fun to work on. I love the community. Like I love everything about it. As a person,
I think probably the short summary is that there are two things that would enable Levelhead update. One is somehow Levelhead actually becomes really sort of successful on its own, right? Due to like surprise influencer sort of engagement or something. So that it becomes worth us diverting our resources to do that. Or like Seth said, we end up due to Crashlands 2 or due to some subsequent thing, right? End up with such a long runway where our studio is just fine forever now, right? Or for at least a very long time, that we could just do what we want. Mm-hmm. But those are realistically the two scenarios that allow us to do that, which has nothing to do with whether or not we want to. Just to also be clear,
we do. I mean, we want to update all of our games. Like I still want to add stuff to Quadrupus Rampage.
I still want to get all the IPs yeeted out of there so that we can like make it a standalone game, right? And get it on Steam. Like I don't even know if anybody would buy it, but I want it actually to be available to people.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Actually, I've always had, ever since we launched Crashlands 2, I've always had this kind of fantasy of something called like the Butterscotch Arcade or Butterscotch Classic, something. Where
you worked on that a while ago.
I did work on it for a little while, just like as a proof of concept, but basically like take all the smaller games, whether it's like Quadrupus Rampage, Roid Rage, Flop Rocket, like some of these, or even like Freeway Mutant.
Basically the jam games and stuff, right?
Yeah, just some of these jam games and stuff, and like roll them all into one app. And then we kind of found that would in some cases be interpreted as an app store and would not be allowed to be published on mobile.
And it's a really big technical
it's a tremendous.
So it would take far longer to do. Like that's just something that would be like, it'd be fun to do, but then of course you got to justify. And it's like, especially as the studio expands and we get more and more full-time people, et cetera, it's like, all right, if we take our development team and we just fuck off and go do this weird thing for like 3 months while everybody else is like, what are we doing here? Right.
It's the reality of the cost of running a studio that's an actual, business where everybody's getting paid and we have benefits and all that kind of stuff, right? Is the monthly
burn just keeps getting bigger.
And it's a big, horrible number, It's like it's just big.
It turns out supporting this many people is expensive.
Yeah, it is really because we're over here and like we're not paying like Netflix salaries or any of that kind of shit, right? We're like we're trying to do the best that we can by ourselves and the rest of our team, right? But we can't be competitive with those entities. But then when I look out, but I know how much it costs even under that scenario, right? To have this
with our small team,
with our
level
8 full-time people and a few part-timers, right? And which is just a tiny company, right?
Yeah. Tiniest.
And it costs so much to run this thing. And I'm out there looking at like even a 30-person team, and because that means it's going to cost like 5 times as much or 4 times as much basically, right, to run it. And I'm like, how are you bringing in enough revenue to support this shit? That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. I remember it was a while ago. It was I think around the time that we launched Crashlands, and I was so psyched about how well it did and the possibilities of like potentially expanding the studio and like the money coming in and stuff. And I remember just like, I don't know, on accident, I stumbled across some numbers about like how much money does a typical McDonald's franchise, a single McDonald's bring in a year. And it just like blew it like in revenue. And it just blew our Crashlands numbers out.
Well, because the revenue is what pays everybody, right? The profit is excess money, right?
The profit is lower, of course.
But the revenue means that if they're bringing in a few $1 million, like that's what they have to pay everybody for the year, right?
It's like the typical McDonald's store, brings in like $2 million a year, right? And you think like, wow, it's a lot. So it's like, all right, well, but you need like there's a bunch of people in there, and you got to buy all the.
And despite paying them notoriously poorly, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and it's possible that it's
money
making
just
$1 million
goes
of profit, you know, and that, you know, they probably could be paying people like 5 times more and still make plenty of profit, you know, but the fact remains like running any kind of a business of any size, man, that burn rate really just gets away from you, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Scale is expensive.
Yeah, which is all to say, anytime we were like, what should we be putting our time into? We have to take into account that it costs a lot to put our time into things. And that's true no matter how, and it's also true if you're an individual, because like the cost is still your time, right? And it's really easy to look at that and be like, well, the financial cost of that is free if you're not paying yourself, right? But it's the only resource you actually have is your time, right? And so
be very careful.
It's not free. It's very
if money was no object, there's a good chance we would actually still just be adding content to Levelhead.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, like,
well, because also it's so much easier. It's so much easier than building Crashlands too, right? And very satisfying out of the gate, because you get
working on a thing that already exists is way
it's always
easier.
better. Yeah.
So
of course, like once Crashlands 2 is out, it'll be very satisfying to add content to that.
Well, and that's part of the problem too, exactly. Because once Crashlands 2 is out, because now the question is, well, if we're just doing what we want, do we want to put stuff into Crashlands 2 though? You know, because the answer is yes.
My answer is yes, 100%.
Yeah, and so now if we could just choose and do anything, and Crashlands 2 is out, the problem there is that, well, that's probably where we want to do stuff, right?
Yeah. If we got 2 games out that we like, well, we got several now.
We got to pick our favorite child, and that's the one we're going to do, you know? So.
Yep. All right. Next question comes from Fraser, who says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Steam wishlist numbers are undoubtedly correlated with sales. So does asking people to wishlist the game also increase sales? Or are developers good-hearting on an especially visible metric when efforts would be better spent on less quantifiable outcomes? So I'd say this is different because wish lists are part of the algorithmic background that determines whether your game gets shown to people.
In other words, getting more wish lists lets you get more eyeballs, which are a different metric entirely, right? It's not just...
Yeah, and I'd say wish lists isn't your measure. Sales is your measure, but you can't get those until you launch the game, right? And so wishlist is basically a proxy for sales, and we use it as the objective.
It's a leading indicator, basically, for success of the product. However, to the point, it is true that the more you, of course, ask for wish lists and put that whole call to action up front, you will just get more of them, right? Just by pushing on that concept. And so what you do see, and I think there's actually just a Game Discovery newsletter article about this, is that the total amount of wish lists that people are getting is going up over time, actually. Yeah. But the point is
but the value the likelihood of a given wish list converting to a paying player at launch is going. It's not going down. I think it's just really wide. Did it go down?
It's extremely wide. Yeah,
it's just really wide.
So it's anywhere from basically 10% of your wish list total to more than 100%, which, means it's kind of a fucking useless number at the end of the day.
Right. Really. You get 50,000 wish lists at launch, or before launch, you launch your game and you get 250,000 sales. Yep. That happens.
Yep. And so because that the reality of how it relates to the end product, it is correlated, and it's the only way that you can get an idea of are people interested in this? Does it seem to be resonating? Which is it's like the only metric that you can use for that.
And people have to expend effort to do it, right? So I think any metric where you're trying to gauge people's interest, you just have to be careful what the incentives are, right? But I think the nice thing about a wish list is that the incentive for a player to wish list something, there's only one incentive, which is they want to know when the game is out. Yep. That's literally the only reason, right? Yep. And so that means if they do it, it's either or it's because they've been convinced that they should, right? Those are the kind of two things. But it's really hard to convince somebody they should do it if they don't want to, because there's no way for a person we won't even if all of our podcast listeners, right? We would love it if you would go wishlist Crashlands 2, right? But if you don't, we don't fucking know that. There's no way for us to know that. There's no way for us to pressure you individually to doing it because we can't tell if you did, So I think, but you can also game the system by basically buying wish lists in effect, right? By creating externals, which is also why Steam tries to crack down on that whenever they can. But so given though that on average, the only incentive is the the user-driven incentive of wanting to have that game at some point or consider having it once it launches. It's a pretty good metric for interest. As Sam said, it does correlate with launch success, but from like a numbers, like how many wish lists give you how many sales kind of question.
Very rough.
that is so wide that you can't meaningfully use it as a metric to answer the question. Will it be successful enough though when it launches? Right? You can get a rough sense of like, are people interested enough to engage with this because they want it, so that there actually is an audience. We don't know for sure if it's big enough to support the development of the game, right? But at least we know that there is an audience there. But that's all made more complicated by, as Sam said, the algorithm system, which is actually the goal. The goal for us is, and I think we talk about this a lot, right? Where like the most important things you can do are not get some press outlet to write about your game or to get a specific influencer to do it. It's always to like get the Steam pop up, get front page store treatment on whatever the store is, because those just have so much more reach and power than anything else you can do. So all of our efforts, all of our wish listing efforts are geared towards that. We actually saw that this week we finally hit a high enough threshold of driving our own wish list into Crashlands 2 that Steam put us into the discovery queue and kind of gave us this new, much higher baseline of views and wish lists than we had before.
It increased our daily wish list by about 8-fold.
Yeah.
So there's these points where like once you hit that number of wish lists, your game has now suddenly reached a new level of exposure that Steam will start showing it more and more and more, right? And that's something we kind of found that there's a positive feedback loop and a negative feedback loop, and you can also see this. There's a website, I don't know if it's still running, but Steam Likes, which was a website where you can look up a game, and then it just tells you how many other games are pointing to my game. Because when you're looking at a game, there'll be a little section that says other games like this. Yeah. Right. And what that really is it's an indicator of the algorithmic exposure that Steam is giving to your game. So what we found was like in many cases, like we had just an incredibly difficult time getting Levelhead to show up on other games. Our Steam likes was just always perpetually low. Right. And with Crashlands, it was much higher than Levelhead, right? And so there's all these
kind of like it's still kind of basically good for an indie sort of vibe. But then you look at some of the indie breakouts and the amount, like it's again, this is all log scale shit, right? So that's what we talk about. Like you hit these different tiers of these feedback loops, and the success proportionally is
it jumps by 10x or whatever.
Yeah, it's insane, right? And so it's very, I think it's important to note that when we're trying to do some of these kind of lever things, some of these judo-y lever things with, say, like a daily deal that also points to Crashlands 2, whatever else, that it's almost not even that exact moment that we care about so much as it is the cumulative long-term effect of having had a large spike, right? And it's likely that this big benefit that we've gotten from being put back in this discovery queue, it will fade. There's no way it's not going to fade over time. There's limited traffic to Steam, right? And so if we're not going to maintain that level of hotness that we had from the amount of traffic we got from the daily deal, right? But there's the question of where does it settle? Does it settle back at the exact same amount we were at before, which was good, but can it settle
bottom out
higher?
Higher? Yeah.
Does it settle like 2 times higher? Because 2 times higher over the course of a long time before a launch means just a tremendously higher amount of attention on the game in total.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Or is there a point at which like things slow down to a point where Steam says, oh, well, we're not going to put you in the discovery queue anymore.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Because again, there's a positive and a negative feedback loop where if your game is already getting tons of traction and people are coming into it from other sources and whatever, and if you've already got like 200,000 wish lists or something, then Steam basically, like their algorithm sees that and it gets $ in its eyes. And then the algorithm is like, this is going to be a big one. This is going to move some units. I got to make sure more people see this. Right. And so it just gets shown to more people. But then the inverse is true. If you come in and, if you've had your game up, if you had a store page up for a couple of months and over that time, you've only accumulated like 1,000 wish lists or something. Then Steam sees that, and Steam basically just says, "Yeah, nobody's gonna play this," and then therefore I will not show it to anyone. Right? And so
you climb out of that hole. Basically.
You got to climb out of the hole, and then once you're out, you can start to ramp up. But man, it's a real tough climb, So yeah, that's how we're thinking about wish lists right now. So we have one final quick question.
Let's go.
To round out the episode, which is from Retro Banana Man NL, who says, "It might be my bad, but every time I hear you guys say co-pilot for docs, I hear dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I get very excited that somebody would have made that and then realize it is not for dogs." So I don't know what a co-pilot for dogs would be like, but I think that's just us. That's just people.
That's just a person. Right? You are the co-pilot with
the dog is the pilot, and I'm the co-pilot. I'm just here to make sure.
Well, I guess that's the idea, though. Is when does AI take your job as the dog's co-pilot, so that we have an AI co-pilot for dogs?
I mean, a better question is where is this ship going that has these two pilots? Okay, because
that's going on a walk.
Park. Is it a park ship? What kind of ship is it? Because the reality is, like, when you're building code, co-pilot for code is all about delivering code projects, right? Co-pilot for a dog,
all about the journey.
Well, yeah, where you going? What's this?
You're just happy to be here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dogs don't care about delivering products. They just want to get that stick. They just want to roll in a thing.
It was the thing, right? If a co-pilot is about you're trying to get from point A to point B, but dogs don't give a shit about getting to point B. They just want to hang. You know what I mean?
Well, they'll get to point B if something smells interesting over there.
Very food motivated. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe co-pilot for dogs is more about treat acquisition streamlining.
There you go.
You know, something like that.
Yep.
So we'll have to do more research into that, and we'll report back if we find anything. So that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the archives. And as always, head on over to Steam and give us a wish list on Crashlands 2. As we just discussed, it helps, boost our algorithmic exposure, and it'll help us get a good, successful launch out there. So we'd appreciate that. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.